How much do you know about the Minnesota Chippewa tribe? Okay, let's go back in time to see how all this got started. As far back as we can remember, natives have always been sovereign.
What do you mean by sovereign?
What I mean is we've always had the right to govern ourselves.
In 1787, the U.S. created their constitution, and that says that the federal government, not the states, has the authority to deal with Indians.
That's why the treaties were made with the federal government.
Yeah, almost 400 treaties were made back then.
And they're still important today.
After the treaties were made, there were a bunch of laws and court decisions which impacted our ability to exercise our sovereignty.
One of those was the Supreme Court decision, Cherokee Nation v. Georgia in 1831.
That ruling said that tribes are domestic dependent nations and have a relationship like a guardian to a ward of the U.S.
Yeah, they thought our ancestors were incompetent and needed to be supervised.
Later, that turned into a trust relationship. That made the federal government the trustee of Indian tribes, including managing our land and natural resources.
Yeah, that worked out really great for us. Cobell settlement?
Okay, fast forwarding a bit here. With the Great Depression, many Indian people plunged deeper into poverty.
Deeper?
So in 1934, the U.S. government approved a law called the IRA. That's the Indian Reorganization Act.
They said the main idea with the IRA was to help reduce poverty on reservations.
The self-governance part of the IRA allowed tribes to create their own constitutions. Yeah, okay, like we already didn't have those rights.
They even provided a template that included a single small governing structure without any checks and balances.
Like when the court stopped Trump's travel ban?
In 1936, 6 Anishinaabe bands came together and formed the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe, or MCT.
That must have been one heck of a concert, like Woodstock for the Ojibs.
We're calling them bands and reservations here because those are the terms used in the MCT Constitution. But the U.S. government also uses the terms tribes and nations.
This is confusing, but all these terms refer to political entities.
The 6 bands of the MCT are Bois Forte, Fond du Lac, Grand Portage, Leech Lake, Mille Lacs, and White Earth.
The MCT is pretty unique because most other tribes only have one reservation.
We always get a table because we have 6 reservations. At first, the BIA thought that each reservation would adopt its own constitution. But a local BIA employee argued that the Minnesota Chippewas were one tribe with several reservations.
He used BIA templates to draft the MCT Constitution and then held a vote on it.
Even though not all the reservations voted for the Constitution, it was still adopted in 1936.
The BIA had a lot of influence on the MCT during those first years. The new government was a big change.
You can say that again.
The new government was a big change.
Okay, let me cover a bit about the original MCT Constitution, because it was pretty different from what we have now. Up to 2 tribal delegates could be elected each year from the communities on the 6 reservations.
Wait, how many tribal delegates?
About 65.
Oh,
Tribal delegates selected 2 people from each reservation to become the TEC, also known as the Tribal Executive Committee.
Tribal delegates then picked who was going to be president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer of the TEC.
The TEC was the governing body of the MCT.
Back then, the Constitution also stated that each reservation and community had the right to govern itself in local matters.
Local charters were in place until the Constitution changed in 1963.
The MCT is a one-branch style of government. This means that all of the power is concentrated in the TEC.
The TEC makes laws and implements them as they see fit.
Our Constitution doesn't mention a court system, so we don't have checks and balances in place like other governments.
Now let's talk about some changes to the Constitution. The first changes were approved by voters in 1963 and approved by the Secretary of Interior in 1964. That's why we call it the revised Constitution.
The delegate system was abolished. The reservation charters were revoked. and the RBCs were started.
Wait, hold on. What is the RBC?
It's the Reservation Business Committee, or sometimes called the Reservation Tribal Council, or RTC. Terms for elected officials change from 1 year to 4 years.
And 1/4 of MCT blood became a requirement for enrollment.
Then, in 1972, more changes were made.
The voting age became 18, and you could only run for office on the reservation of your enrollment.
Dang, that's not racist, that's resist.
In 1980, the TEC decided that they were the only ones with the authority to interpret the MCT Constitution.
Typically, judges have the authority to interpret constitutions, so the TEC also functions like a court.
2 more changes were made in 2005.
One restricted anyone from running for office if they've been convicted of a felony or a crime of theft from a tribe.
That's fine. I didn't want to run for office anyway.
And the other one required that candidates running for office live on the reservation of their enrollment 1 year before filing for office.
I think I'm starting to get it now.
It can be overwhelming, but it's important that we understand this history so we can get involved in our own government.
So what does the Minnesota Chippewa tribe look like today?
The MCT is made up of 6 reservations. Each reservation has 5 elected officials. The positions are typically called the chairperson, secretary-treasurer, and 3 district representatives.
Most of the reservation business committees have come to be known as reservation tribal councils, except Mille Lacs, who has a chief executive officer and band assembly.
How do people get elected into the TEC or RBC?
Better get your Facebook page up. Wait, do you have to pass a whiz quiz?
It is up to each RBC to ensure each candidate is eligible to run for office and to follow the MCT election ordinance.
The RBCs appoint the election judges.
The election judges hear any election disputes.
The members of the RBCs are elected by the voters enrolled at each reservation.
So if you're enrolled in Leech Lake, you can't vote in the elections in Mille Lacs, even if you live there?
Right, that came into place with the 1972 constitutional amendment.
The RBC is supposed to handle the day-to-day governance of each reservation.
They operate services like childcare and housing.
And they make laws for each reservation. That directly impacts all of us.
They also make agreements.
Some examples are gaming compacts, law enforcement agreements, and self-governance compacts.
But keep in mind that the Constitution clearly states that the RBC must follow the laws and regulations of the Department of the Interior.
Today, the chairperson and the secretary-treasurer from the 6 RBCs come together to become the Tribal Executive Committee, or the TEC.
The Tribal Executive Committee.
Yes, we call it the TEC.
So there are 12 TEC members in all?
Yes, 2 elected officials from each reservation, the secretary-treasurer and the chairperson.
So, we only get to vote for 2 out of the 12.
How long do they hold their positions?
4 years.
How many times can they be reelected?
As long as voters keep reelecting them, there's no limit.
So if my relatives keep voting for me, I could be set for life?
If you wish to learn more, visit Zaagibagaang.com.
Can you tell me more about our MCT Constitution?
The Constitution is a document that outlines a framework for the MCT and the 6 reservations.
The Constitution starts with a preamble. This preamble reads like a business plan and focuses on the development of tribal resources and property.
And it makes sure that it conforms to the privileges granted to us Indians by the United States. Wait, what? I don't remember the U.S. giving us any privileges.
Yep, we can sure see the influence of the BIA on this one.
After the preamble, the Constitution is broken up into 15 articles, and each article has sections.
The sections tell us what elected officials are responsible to do. There's also information on elections, vacancies, and removal.
For example, Article 3 establishes the TEC and the RBCs. and Articles 5 and 6 spell out their powers.
The TEC is responsible for setting up rules for enrollment and elections of all 6 reservations.
So even though there are articles in the Constitution on election and enrollment, the TEC passes laws or ordinances that give the exact details of how those processes are carried out.
Another section of the Constitution lists the TEC bylaws that describe the duties of the TEC officers.
The RBCs have their own bylaws that they follow.
If it's our constitution, can we change it?
Yes, first the TEC must request a secretarial election from the Secretary of Interior. Then, at least 30% of the people qualified to vote must do so.
Then, if the amendment passes, the Secretary of the Interior has to approve it before it's official.
Wow, there's so much to learn.
How can I learn more?
Visit Zaagibagaang.com to download the original MCT Constitution and more.
Miigwech, this is really important to know.